The handshake that changed everything. In the year 2098, the world was watching as the first alien ship landed near the United Nations building in New Geneva. The sky was filled with lights and drones. The media was everywhere. People were shouting and cheering. Some were scared and some were hopeful. David Cross stood at the back of the group, wearing a simple black suit with a translation device on his wrist. He was just a translator, nothing more, not important. Not a leader, not a scientist. Just a man who understood alien language because he had studied it for years after the first signals were picked up in space. Was not supposed to be on the front line. He was not supposed to meet the alien ambassador face to face, but plans had changed at the last moment. The main translator got sick and someone pointed to David and said, "You go, David." Felt nervous, his hands were sweating, his heart was beating fast, but he walked forward, slowly with the others beside the world leaders and the generals and the president of Earth United Council. The alien ship opened without sound, a ramp came down, and the ground shook gently. A tall, glowing figure stepped forward. Her skin shimmered like silver, and her eyes were large and blue like the ocean. Her face was calm, peaceful, wise. She wore no armor, no weapon, just a long robe with strange symbols floating across it. Everyone held their breath. She stopped in front of the president and bowed slowly. The president bowed back. Then she turned and looked at David. Her eyes paused on him like she knew him already, like they had met before. In some dream, he felt a strange pull in his mind. A whisper like music he could not understand. She stepped closer to him and lifted her hand. The others looked at David and motioned for him to do the same. He raised his hand and they shook hands. In that moment, something strange happened. Her eyes flashed bright white, then gold. Her mouth opened like she wanted to speak, but no sound came. Her legs gave way and she fell into David's arms. Panic broke out. Security moved in. Scientists rushed forward. Medics shouted orders. People ran in every direction. David held her in his arms, frozen, confused, scared. Her skin was burning hot like fire. Heartbeat was fast and her breathing was deep and heavy. He looked around for help, but everyone was looking at him like he had done something wrong or something impossible. The head scientist shouted, "Take them both to the medical center now." David was pulled away with the alien ambassador still in his arms. Lights were flashing, alarms were ringing, and the whole world was watching. The news feeds exploded with the words, "Alien collapse after human contact." Inside the medical center, strange machines scanned her body. Lights moved over her skin, and a team of alien doctors worked with human ones. Nobody knew what to do. They had never seen this before. They had no idea what was happening to her. David sat in a corner, his hands shaking, his mind spinning. He kept asking, "What happened? What did I do?" But nobody answered him. They were too busy, too afraid, too confused. Hours passed. The doctors whispered to each other. The lead alien medic looked at the human general and said something in their language. The general looked at David with wide eyes like he had seen a ghost. The general walked over and said, "David, we need to talk now." They took him to a small glass room with only one chair and a screen. The general sat across from him and said, "Do you know what you did?" David said, "I don't know, I just shook her hand." General looked down, then said that handshake triggered something. It activated a biological process, something sacred, something rare, something they call the chosen reaction. David asked, "What does that mean?" Before the general could answer, the door opened, and a nurse said, "She is awake. She is asking for him, only him." Walked slowly into the quiet room. The alien ambassador was lying on a bed, her skin now calm and glowing. Her eyes opened. As he entered, she looked tired, but her gaze was strong and clear. She lifted her hand again, not to shake, but to touch his face, gently like he was a memory from long ago. Her voice was soft like wind through trees. She said only 3 words, "You are chosen." David did not understand. He tried to speak, but his mouth was dry. His thoughts were loud and broken. She smiled faintly and placed her hand on her stomach, her fingers glowing with soft light. David looked down and saw the glow moving inside her like a star being born, like life beginning in a place it should know. Stepped back, his body cold, his heart racing. He looked at the nurse, then at the doctor, then back at her. Doctor nodded slowly and whispered the truth. She Is pregnant, David, and the baby is yours asterisk. The room was silent as David sat on the metal bench inside the observation dome, far above. Earth, the stars looked close, but his mind was far away, spinning around a single thought that refused to leave. The alien ambassador was pregnant, and the child was as outside the glass wall. Soldiers walked by with serious faces. Scientists moved around with tablets in hand. Voices echoed in different languages, but David heard nothing. He was still trying to understand how a simple handshake had led to this strange, impossible moment. Doors slid open with a soft sound, and 3 people entered. 2 were human. One was Valari. The alien stood tall with dark green robes and long arms that moved slowly like waves. In water, her name was Minister Valine, and she was a high advisor from the Valari Council. Her eyes glowed with faint light, and her face showed no emotion, only deep thought. The human general spoke first. He said, David, you need to listen carefully. What happened between you and Ambassador Thalra is not just unusual, it is historic. It is dangerous. It is also sacred to the Valari, and you are now part of their prophecy. David looked at the general and said, I did not do anything. I just shook her hand and then everything went crazy. I do not understand any of this. Minister Velen stepped forward, her voice smooth like wind through glass. She said, David, you are not a criminal, and you are not to blame. The ambassador chose to touch you because your mind and spirit matched an ancient energy our people have long searched for. We believe you are the link. David frowned and said, what is the link? She walked closer and touched her chest. Gently as she spoke, the link is the one who can bond with Valari essence and create life that carries both worlds in its blood. A life that can bring peace or destroy everything we knowed. Felt a chill move through his body as she continued. The child is growing inside Thalra, but faster than any normal growth. We believe the child is pulling energy from you. Even at a distance, your connection is strong, unbroken, alive. The general looked uneasy and said, David, we have a problem. Earth governments are panicking. The public wants answers. Some think this baby could be a threat. Others think it is a miracle. And there is debate about what to do with you and the ambassador. David stood up slowly and said, I do not care about their fear or their politics. I care about her. She looked at me like she trusted me, and now she is carrying something that should not even be possible. I need to see her. Minister Velen nodded and motioned for the guards to open the door. They walked together down a long hall filled with soft lights and humming machines. The air smelled like metal and ozone. David's heart pounded with every step. He did not know what he was walking into, only that something inside him had already changed. The door opened to a wide chamber filled with glowing plants and floating light panels. Ambassador Thalra lay in the center on a soft bed made of alien fibers. Her skin was brighter, now her eyes calm and powerful. When she saw David, she smiled and lifted her hand again. He walked to her slowly, unsure what to say, unsure how to feel. Her voice entered his mind like before, without sound, without words. Just feelings, images, memories of stars, of warmth, of fire, of sorrow, and of hope. She said, the child is strong already. He dreams, he listens, he knows your name and your fears. He knows you are afraid of being a father, of being alone, of being used by people who do not care. But he also feels your courage. David touched her hand gently and asked, what happens now? Thalra closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them with deep emotion. The child will be born soon, far sooner than humans expect. He will be different, not just in form, but in mind. He will understand both our worlds. He will be loved and hunted. He will be peace and also power. Minister Velen stepped forward and said, the council has spoken. David, you and Thalra must come with us to Velar Prime. Your child will not be safe here. Earth is not ready. David turned to her and asked, do I have a choice? She answered softly, yes, but no path is safe if you stay. Your leaders will try to control the child. If you leave, you enter a war that has been waiting for centuries. The Krell know of this birth. They will come for him. General stepped forward again and said, you need to decide now. A ship is ready. We can protect you there, or we can lock you down here under Earth control. But I promise you they will not let this go quietly. David looked at Thalra, her eyes now glowing brighter than before. He looked at Minister Velen, then at the stars above, and finally Back to himself inside his own thoughts and fears and hopes, he took a breath and said, "Then take me to Velar Prime. I will not run from this child. I will not hide from what I have become." The chamber grew silent again, and in that silence something deep awakened, something ancient, something waiting in the dark. The stars above Earth sparkled like frozen fire as the Velari ship slowly rose from the launch platform, its surface glowing with soft blue lines that pulsed like a living heartbeat. David stood near the glass wall inside the ship watching his home become smaller and smaller as they moved higher into space. The world he had known his whole life was fading behind him, but his heart felt heavy, not with fear, but with something deeper, something like a question with no answer. Beside him, Ambassador Thalra rested in a seat designed for her form, her body wrapped in silver cloth, her eyes closed but her thoughts reaching out to him. He could feel her presence, even when she did not speak. Her energy wrapped around him like wind around a flame. Silent but alive, Minister Velen walked over, her hands behind her back and her face calm. She said, "We will reach Velar Prime in 40 hours, Earth time. During that time, you must prepare yourself for what is coming. Not just war, not just politics, but truths that have been hidden for longer than your planet has existed." David nodded slowly and followed her deeper into the ship. The halls were curved like the inside of a shell. The lights moved with them, following their steps. The walls hummed with soft sound like breathing. The Velari ship felt alive, not like a machine, but like a creature that understood its passengers. They entered a chamber filled with floating crystals, each one spinning slowly in the air, glowing with soft green and purple light. Velen touched one of them, and the room shifted, showing stars and galaxies around them like a living map. She said, "This is the path to Velar Prime, and these are the territories of the Krell, our ancient enemy. They do not create. They only take. They do not grow. They only consume." David asked, "Why do they want the child? What do they fear?" Velen turned to him, her eyes serious. "Because the child is not just life. He is balance. He is the bridge between light and shadow, between creation and destruction. The Krell fear anything they cannot control, and your child is beyond control." He felt a shiver down his spine and asked, "What am I then? Just a father, just an accident?" She smiled slightly and said, "You are not an accident. You are a seed planted in chaos and grown in silence." The Velari believe in signs and symbols and ancient words written in the stars. You are part of one of those words, whether you accept it or not. David left the chamber and walked to Thalra. She opened her eyes as he arrived, her hand gently resting on her stomach, which now glowed with stronger light. He sat beside her and took her hand without words. They shared thoughts, dreams, fears. He saw flashes of her past, her training, her sorrow, her people watching their cities fall to the Krell. He saw her loneliness before she met him, and her quiet hope when she touched his hand for the first time. "Thalra," whispered, "the child hears music when you are near. Your thoughts are like song to him. He is growing fast, his mind already shaping. He will speak before he breathes air, and he will see through more than eyes." David felt both awe and fear. He was not ready to raise a child, not on Earth, and not on some alien world, especially a child like this one, born of two worlds, hunted by enemies, and wrapped in mystery. Later, as he tried to rest, the ship shook with sudden force. Alarms rose across the halls, and lights turned red. Velen's voice echoed through the walls, "Prepare for contact. Unknown ships have entered the corridor." David ran to the nearest window and saw them. Black, sharp vessels like knives in the void, moving fast with red trails behind them. The Krell had found them. Stood already surrounded by guards, her hand on her stomach, her face calm. She looked at David and spoke in his mind, "They are not here for war. They are here for the child." Weapons fired, light exploded across space. The Velari ship moved with grace, spinning and dodging blasts with strange energy shields. But the Krell were relentless. Their weapons cut through space like fire through paper. David felt something rise in his chest, not fear but heat, energy, the same feeling he had when he first touched Thalra. He reached out to a panel near the wall, and it lit up under his hand. Symbols moved and shifted, reacting to him as if he had done this before. Ship responded to his touch, changing course, boosting speed, closing shields. The Valari around him stared in shock as their systems obeyed a human. His connection to the child was changing him, already making him something more than he had been. Velen shouted, "We must enter the fold. Drive now, brace yourselves." The stars stretched like strings of light as the ship jumped forward, escaping the Krell. Attack! The ship fell into silence, once more floating in a blue void between systems. A place called the Veil, safe for now. David stood in the middle of the command deck, his chest rising and falling, his hand still glowing slightly. Thalra stepped beside him and whispered, "The bond is awakening." He looked into her eyes and asked, "What am I becoming?" She answered, "Not just a father, something new, something the galaxy has not seen before." Behind them, in the shadows of space, the Krell watched and waited. The blue void outside the ship shimmered like liquid glass as the Valari vessel floated silently within the veil, a hidden path between stars where time moved slower and no signal could enter or escape. The crew worked quietly, repairing systems, checking scans, and watching for any sign of the enemy, while deep inside the heart of the ship, David stood with his hand against a glowing wall, feeling the pulse of something ancient and alive running through the metal. He could feel it now, the strange energy inside him, not just a gift from the child, but something older, something tied to the ship, to the Valari, to a power waiting to wake up. His fingers left trails of light as he moved them across the surface, the ship responding like it knew him, like it had been waiting for him. Ambassador Thalra entered the chamber, her eyes glowing brighter than before. Her steps slow but steady, her presence filled the space like warmth in winter. Her voice reached his thoughts even before she spoke aloud. "The child is listening, David. He dreams of stars and voices and shadows. He knows danger is coming. He feels it in the dark." David turned to her, his face tense with worry and wonder. He asked, "How can I protect him? I am not ready. I do not even understand what I am becoming." Thaler touched his hand and said, "You do not have to understand. You only have to choose. You are not alone, not anymore." Suddenly alarms echoed through the ship again. Red lights washed over the walls and voices shouted across the command deck. The Krell had returned faster than expected, stronger than before. This time, they had tracked the ship even into the Veil. Minister Velen appeared beside them, her face grim. She said, "We cannot fight here. The fold drive is still cooling, and the ship is too damaged to run again. We must hide or face them now." David felt a burning in his chest, the child inside. Thalra was awake and sending him thoughts, not in words, but in shapes and colors and sounds, flashes of fire, wings of shadow, screams in the dark, and something worse, something waiting behind the Krell, something even they feared. He looked at the others and said, "We fight. We have no choice. They will never stop chasing us unless we show them we are not afraid." Velen nodded and sent orders across the ship. Defense systems powered up, weapons charged, energy shields flickered into shape. But the crew was afraid. Their enemy was not just strong, it was cruel. It destroyed whole worlds and left nothing behind. The Krell ships appeared like monsters from a dream, black and sharp, with glowing red eyes that moved across their surface like insects. They surrounded the Valari ship like wolves around a wounded deer and began their attack. Beams of red light shot through the veil and crashed into the shields, shaking the ship like thunder. David ran to the command deck and placed his hands on the control panel. Symbols lit up around him, reacting to his thoughts. The ship turned and moved with unnatural speed, dodging attacks as if it could see the future. The crew stared in awe, unsure if it was the ship or David guiding them. Thalra stood behind him, her hands resting on her stomach. Her eyes focused, she whispered, "He is helping you, through me, through us. You and the child are one now. You feel what he feels. You see what he sees." Outside, a Krell ship charged toward them, weapons glowing, ready to fire. David raised his hand and without touching anything, the ship responded. Energy beams fired back, not from weapons, but from the hull itself, like light pushed by thought. The Krell ship exploded into dust. Cheers rose across the ship, but it was short. The largest Krell vessel began to move, its shape shifting like smoke, its core burning with dark fire. It spoke through the speakers, not in words, but in growls and pulses, the voice of something that hated all life. It said, "Give us the hybrid, and we will let the rest live." David stepped forward, his voice clear and strong. He said, "If you want him, you come through me." First the enemy laughed, a sound that twisted metal and froze blood. The Krell ship fired again and again, shaking the Velari vessel to its core. Power dropped, systems failed, hull cracked, but still the ship fought back, not with weapons, but with will. With the bond of father, mother, and child holding it together. Then in a moment of silence, the lights inside the ship turned white, and the child inside Thalra sent out a wave of pure energy. It moved through the walls, through the stars, through the Krell ships like wind through fire, and everything stopped. The Krell ships froze in space, their engines dead, their weapons silent, their dark voices gone like smoke after rain. And in that silence the Velari ship moved forward, rising from the ashes of fear, glowing with the light of something new. David stood in the center of the deck, his body still, his hands shaking, his mind filled with visions of worlds far away and battles yet to come. He looked at Thalra, and she looked back, both knowing this was only the beginning, because in the dark, between stars, something else had opened its eyes, and it had seen the child. Asterisk. The sky above Velar Prime burned with golden clouds as the great ship descended through the mist. Its hull cracked, its lights dim, but its heart still strong. The city below stretched across the cliffs like veins of living crystal, pulsing with soft light, and ancient memory towers floated in the air, supported by energy unknown to humans, and bridges curved across open space like ribbons of glass. The planet itself hummed with power like a song too deep to hear, but too strong to ignore. David stood near the window, his hands resting on the frame, his eyes wide with awe, but his heart heavy with fear. The battle in the Vale had changed him. The energy from the child still moved through him, not wild, not angry, but full of purpose. He felt like a vessel, not empty, but ready ambassador. Thalra lay behind him in a chamber shaped like a blooming flower, her body glowing brighter, her breathing slow and deep. The child within her had grown fast, impossibly fast. Now she could barely move without shaking the air around her. She called to David, not with her voice, but with her presence, and he came. Without hesitation, he sat beside her and held her hand, which now pulsed with heat like the surface of a star. Her eyes opened slowly, and she smiled, not with strength, but with truth, and whispered through their shared thought, "He is ready, he is coming now." Minister Velen entered the chamber with a group of Velari healers there, robes soft and shining, their hands full of light and tools, not built by machines, but shaped by will. They moved around Thalra with gentle speed, their voices calm, their minds focused. The birth was not only rare, it was sacred, something their kind had not seen in 1,000 cycles. David was asked to leave the chamber, but he refused, and Thalra nodded to allow him to stay. He belonged here. Now, not as an outsider, not even as a guest, but as a part of the event, as the bridge between what was and what would bait. Air thickened, the walls began to shimmer, the lights dimmed, and the sound of the city faded away as the birth began. It was not pain like human pain, but transformation. Energy flowed from Thalra into the space around her. Her body lifted from the bed, her skin lit with veins of light. Her voice rose in a long, deep tone that filled the chamber like the call of a whale across a vast ocean. David felt something move through him, not fear, not panic, but connection, as if the child was reaching for him before ever breathing the world. The Velari healers formed a circle, their hands raised, their voices joining in a chant older than language itself, a harmony of life, a melody of becoming. The chamber shook, but nothing broke. The walls bent but did not fall. The light turned from blue to gold, to white, and in that final moment, the child emerged, floating, not crying, not weak, but glowing like a small sun. His body not strange, not terrifying, but beautiful, his skin smooth and light, his eyes open and deep and ancient and new all at once. He hovered in the air between them, his small hands outstretched, his gaze moving from Thalra to David and back again. And then he spoke, not with voice, but with mind, and said, "I know you. I chose you." Hara reached for him, her arms trembling, her face full of love and sorrow and pride. She whispered his name in Velari, which meant seed of stars, but David heard something else in his own heart, the name Eli, and he spoke it aloud. The child turned to him and smiled, and the entire chamber warmed like morning sun after a cold night. The healers wept not from sadness, but from awe. Minister Velen bowed deeply and whispered, "It is done. It has begun." David held the child in his arms. Unsure how, but certain it was right. The weight was not heavy, but the meaning was infinite. He looked at Thalra, who was now weak. Her energy spent, her eyes soft. She mouthed "thank you," and then drifted into sleep surrounded by light. Outside the city trembled not from war, but from change. The Valari people sensed it across the towers and valleys. They looked to the sky and felt the shift. The prophecy was no longer words. It was real. It was here. But even as peace filled the chamber, a new sound echoed across the sky, a deep roar, not from nature, but from machines. The sensors screamed, the walls turned red again, and Velen's voice shook as she said, "They found us. The Krell are here." David stood tall with the child still in his arms, his mind already racing, not with fear, but with clarity. The birth was not the end. It was the spark, and now the fire would spread. He looked at the child, and the child looked back, and in that gaze there was no question, only knowing. The war had come again, but this time humanity would not run, and the Valari would not kneel, and the Krell would not face the same world they once tried to break. They would face something new, something made of both light and will. They would face a father and his son. The skies over Velar Prime turned black as the Krell descended from the clouds, their ships shaped like claws of shadow slicing through the golden light of the Valari towers. Their engines screamed across the air, sending tremors through the city below. People ran to shelters, alarms echoed across the crystal streets, and the guardians of the old world prepared for a battle they had long feared would come. Inside the sanctuary chamber, David held the child against his chest, the boy now wrapped in glowing silk, the warmth of his body calming the storm around them, his small hand resting near David's heart, not afraid, not confused, only calm, like he had known this moment would arrive. Thalra still slept under healing lights, her body weak but stable, the life she gave still shining in her breath. The Valari healers moved around her with quiet grace, their hands weaving light through her wounds, trying to protect the one who had given birth to something the universe had never seen. Minister Velen stood near the high window, her eyes watching the sky, her voice steady, though her thoughts carried weight. "The child must be moved," she said. "He cannot remain here. The Krell have come for him. They will destroy everything to take him, and if they do, the galaxy will fall into silence." David stepped forward, his face calm but strong, his voice clear without fear. "We run and they will chase, we hide and they will burn every planet. We pass." He looked down at his son, whose glowing eyes looked back with peace and power, "and something older than time. We fight, and they will learn that we are not prey." Velen nodded and touched her hand to the crystal near the wall. It shimmered and revealed a map of Velar Prime, 1,000 paths glowing with possible futures, each one shaped by choice, each one leading to loss or light. She said, "There is one place the child may grow without fear, the Temple of Echoes, hidden deep beneath the surface, built long before memory and untouched by Krell fire." David nodded and turned toward the chamber doors, the child still in his arms. But before they could leave, the walls shook with impact, dust fell from the ceiling, and lights flickered across the room. A voice thundered through the walls, not a voice made of sound, but of hate and hunger and power. It said, "Give us the hybrid, and we will spare what remains." David turned to the voice, though it had no face and no body, and said, "Come and take him if you can." Walls cracked, the ceiling burst open, and black forms fell into the chamber. The Krell warriors, tall and sharp and monstrous, with red lights spilling from their eyes, and weapons shaped like bone and fire. They moved fast without mercy, but David moved faster without thought. The child lifted his hand, and the air changed. The Krell stopped mid-strike, frozen by a force they could not touch or break. Light poured from the boy's fingers, not burning, not blinding, but pure. It wrapped around the warriors like chains of air, and they fell to the floor, not dead but silent, asleep without dream. The Valari stared in silence. Their fear turned to wonder, their doubt turned to hope. They dropped to one knee and whispered the old name, the name from the prophecy the stubborn David held the child higher, and the light from the boys spread across the room, reaching every wall, every corner, every shadow, and then out, through the cracks in the ceiling into the sky, touching the towers, and the people, and the trees and the sky itself, and for a moment the planet. Breathed as one, but far above in orbit, a Krell command ship watched with cold calculation. The voice that had spoken before now whispered again. He is strong but still young. We must act before the roots take hold. Prepare the weapon, erase the city. Turn it to ash back on the surface. The light faded. The child closed his eyes and rested his head against his father's shoulder. David knew what came next. The fight had only begun. The child had revealed his power, and now the enemy would bring. There's not fear, not fire, but something worse, something ancient, something buried. Thalra opened her eyes slowly, her voice weak but firm. She said, he must not stay here. If they destroy the city, and he is near, his soul may fracture and be lost. He must live, he must. Grovlin stepped forward and placed her hand on David's shoulder. I will take you through the deep tunnels to the Echo Temple. No one else knows the path. No one else can protect the way. David looked at her, then at Thalra, then at the boy, and finally at the sky where darkness gathered, and he said, then we go now, not as fugitives, not as victims, but as flame, as storm, as the new answer to an old war. Doors opened and the guardians bowed. The people watched in silence as the father and child stepped into the shadows, guided by the last light of a world not ready to fall. And far away in the black cold, beyond stars, something else stirred, something that knew the name of the child before even the stars could speak. Asterisk. Beneath the stone heart of Villa Prime, the Echo Temple opened like a breath held for 1,000 years. Carved by hands that remembered stars before they were born, the walls shimmered with moving symbols, and the floor pulsed with each step, like it knew who walked upon it, and why the child in David's arms slept without fear, wrapped in light that shifted with his breath, each pulse a quiet reminder that the future had entered the present. Minister Velen led them through the tunnels, her steps silent, her face like stone, the path twisted through time itself, the air filled with the scent of old knowledge and deep earth. Each chamber revealed another layer of forgotten memory, stories told in glowing stone of war and peace and hope and silence. David listened with his heart, not his ears, and the child listened too, not as a student, but as something older than the lesson. Outside, the planet trembled as Krell weapons fired from orbit, beams of red fury, turning towers into dust. The Lari fought with courage, but the enemy had numbers, had fury, had machines older than bones. The sky cried and the earth cracked, but still the temple held strong, untouched, unseen, unbroken. David stood before the altar at the center of the Echo Hall, the child in his arms now awake, his eyes glowing with soft power, his gaze deep like the void between stars. He reached toward the altar, and it opened, not with sound, not with force, but with welcome, revealing a crystal core, spinning with energy so pure it hummed without song. Velen stepped back, her voice trembling with both fear and awe. This place has waited for him, she said, and now it knows he has arrived. The child floated from David's arms into the center of the light. His body small, but his presence vast. He spoke without voice, without words, only with thought that filled every mind around him. I am not the end. I am the door and the flame and the seed. I am not here to rule, but to rise and lift. David felt the energy flow through him, his body now different than it had been, his senses sharper, his heart slower, his skin warmer. The connection between him and the child now complete, not just father and son, but anchor and flame and mirror and sky. Above the temple, the Krell prepared their final weapon, a dark construct shaped like a dead star, filled with compressed gravity and shadow. It was not meant to conquer, it was meant to erase, to crush light into silence. The Krell commander watched with eyes that had seen too much and ordered the descent. Velar Prime shook as the weapon fell. The sky split and the stars turned away, but in the Echo Temple the child lifted his hands, and the crystal core answered with light, not fierce, not wild, but steady and wide, like morning after endless night. The power moved upward through the walls, through the stone, through the very soul of the planet. The weapon reached the atmosphere, but before it could release its death, the sky changed. The light from the temple broke the clouds and wrapped the falling object in warmth and silence and memory. The weapon did not explode, it unraveled like smoke pulled back into the stars, like a dream forgotten after waking. Krell fleet began to break, their ships losing shape, their engines fading, their voices silent. One by one they turned and vanished, not destroyed, not defeated, but dismissed like shadows. When day arrives on the ground, the people of Velar Prime looked upward, not with fear, but with wonder. The stars were still there, the sky was still wide, and the child had not left them. David held him once more, feeling the calm inside the storm. His voice soft but sure, he asked, "What now, my son? What becomes of us?" The child rested his head on his father's shoulder and said, "I will grow, I will learn, and I will walk where others fear. And when I am ready, you will still be there, because you chose to stand when you could have run, and that is what makes you more than a father. That is what makes you the first light." Halra entered the chamber. Her strength returned, her smile soft, her eyes filled with pride. She touched David's arm and whispered, "Thank you for holding what I could not, for carrying more than your weight, for choosing love when fear was easy." David looked at her, then at the people gathering, then at the stars through the open ceiling of the temple, and he knew this was not the end of fear or war or pain, but not the end of hope either. Child had been born of accident and prophecy, of science and fate, of two worlds too different to meet, and yet they had. And from that collision came something no one could destroy. Outside, across galaxies, voices began to whisper new names. Some spoke of the Starburn, others spoke of the Flammy child, but one name echoed louder than all the rest, a name carried in awe and fear, in wonder, the name of the one who did not run from the unknown, the one who shook hands with an alien and changed the galaxy forever. They called him the father of the future.